When Wolfgang Van Halen walked onto the stage at the 2022 Grammy Awards, something had fundamentally changed. The young man who'd spent years being introduced as Eddie Van Halen's son now stood there with his own Grammy nomination for Distance, a song he'd written, performed, and produced entirely himself. But the transformation everyone's talking about didn't happen overnight. For most of his life, Wolfgang carried a burden that few people understood. He wasn't just the son of a guitar legend. He was a kid trying to find his own voice while the world kept insisting he should sound exactly like his father. The real story isn't about rebellion or rejection. It's about something far more complex, learning to honor a legacy while refusing to be consumed by it. Wolfgang William Van Halen entered the world on March 16, 1991, in Santa Monica, California. His parents, Eddie Van Halen and actress Valerie Bertinelli, were at the height of their fame. Eddie had already changed rock music forever with his revolutionary guitar techniques. Valerie was beloved across America for her role on One Day at a Time. The cameras started following Wolfgang before he could even understand what fame meant. But Valerie was determined to give her son something resembling normalcy. In later interviews, Wolfgang would credit his mother with keeping him grounded during those early years. "My mom did a really good job at grounding me," he told reporters. "It wasn't lavish or insane. It felt completely normal." The Van Halen household, despite its famous name, operated like many others. There were family dinners, homework at the kitchen table, and rules about bedtime. The pivotal moment came when Wolfgang was still young enough to believe his father was just a regular dad. He found a stack of Van Halen records while exploring the house one afternoon. The album covers showed massive crowds, stage lights, and his father holding a guitar like it was an extension of his body. Wolfgang picked up one of the records and noticed something startling: his own name printed on the box. "I saw my name on the box," Wolfgang recalled years later, "and I asked my dad, 'What's this?' He said, 'Oh yeah, this is what I do.'" That conversation, brief and matter-of-fact, shattered Wolfgang's childhood innocence. The man who taught him how to ride a bike wasn't just his father. He was a hero to millions of people around the world. Eddie Van Halen understood something crucial about raising a son in his shadow. He never pushed Wolfgang toward music. Instead, around age 8, Eddie handed his son a pair of drumsticks and a stack of magazines. "He put a stack of magazines on the table," Wolfgang remembered. "He told me, 'If you can hit these in time, that's what playing drums is.'" It was unconventional, but it worked. Eddie deliberately started Wolfgang on drums rather than guitar. The reasoning was simple. He didn't want his son to imitate. He wanted him to understand rhythm, timing, and discipline first. Before long, Wolfgang was disappearing into his room for hours, practicing until his hands ached. Even Alex Van Halen, Eddie's brother and the band's longtime drummer, was impressed by his nephew's natural ability. By his early teenage years, Wolfgang had moved on to guitar. But Eddie wasn't much help as a teacher. "My dad wasn't the best teacher," Wolfgang later joked. "He'd just say, 'Do this,' and then play something insane." Eddie's genius was instinctive, not methodical. He couldn't break down his techniques because they came from somewhere beyond instruction. Wolfgang realized he'd have to teach himself. He spent hours studying guitar tabs from bands like System of a Down and Blink-182. He wasn't trying to copy his father's lightning-fast solos or stadium anthems. He wanted something different, something his own. "It was important that I develop my own skills and my own sound," he told Spin magazine. "Otherwise, you'd just be listening to some shoddy Van Halen cover band." Then came 2006, the year everything accelerated. Eddie's health had been unstable for years, but he found renewed energy in his son's growing talent. He invited Wolfgang, then just 15, to jam with him and Alex. The chemistry surprised everyone. Alex couldn't believe the powerful bass lines coming through his headphones were being played by his teenage nephew. "That's Wolf?" he asked in disbelief. When Eddie officially asked Wolfgang to join Van Halen as their new bassist, replacing longtime member Michael Anthony, the teenager understood what was being offered and what it would cost. He agreed, but with one condition delivered as a joke that masked real anxiety: "I'll do it, but I'm not doing any bass solos." The announcement sent shockwaves through the rock community. Van Halen fans, many of them in their 40s and 50s, saw it as the ultimate act of nepotism. Online forums exploded with anger. Radio hosts questioned whether a 15-year-old kid, regardless of his last name, belonged on stage with rock legends. Wolfgang was thrown into the deep end. The 2007-2008 reunion tour with David Lee Roth put him in front of massive crowds every night. He was playing bass for one of the most famous rock bands in history while dealing with fans who'd already decided he didn't deserve to be there. "It was tough," he admitted in later interviews. "I was there to support my dad, but I became the biggest enemy of every 40 to 50-year-old man out there." Every show became a test. Every note was scrutinized. Wolfgang knew that one mistake would confirm what the critics already believed, that he was only there because of his name. The pressure was crushing for a teenager who just wanted to play music. By 2012, Wolfgang had proven himself to many skeptics. Van Halen's album A Different Kind of Truth showcased his musical contributions, and the touring had gone well. But the experience left deep scars. "That did a lot of damage to me," he said years later, reflecting on the constant criticism and the weight of living up to impossible expectations. Wolfgang needed space to breathe. In 2013, he joined Tremonti, the band formed by Creed guitarist Mark Tremonti. This was Wolfgang's chance to be just another working musician. He recalled one particularly intense moment. "I went over one night at midnight and learned the entire set, and the next day we were on tour." He recorded 2 albums with Tremonti, Cauterize and Dust, all while still balancing his commitments to Van Halen. For a few years, Wolfgang managed this dual life. He was Eddie Van Halen's son when he played with Van Halen. He was just Wolf when he played with Tremonti. But beneath the surface, something more troubling was developing. Eddie's health, which had concerned the family for years, was deteriorating. Eddie Van Halen had been fighting cancer since 2001, though the details were kept largely private. He'd undergone treatment, experienced remissions, and continued performing despite the toll it took on his body. Wolfgang watched his father struggle, saw the pain behind the public performances, and knew that time was running out. The relationship between father and son had always been complex. Eddie was gentle and patient at home, remarkably different from his larger-than-life stage persona. He'd given Wolfgang the freedom to find his own path, while also inadvertently creating the circumstances that made that path so difficult. Wolfgang loved his father deeply, but he also needed to escape the shadow that followed him everywhere. By 2020, the world had shifted. The COVID-19 pandemic shut down touring, forced everyone home, and created an eerie stillness. For Wolfgang, this meant more time with his father as Eddie's condition worsened. The cancer had returned with a vengeance, and this time there would be no remission. Wolfgang began working on solo material during this period, recording songs that felt deeply personal. He played every instrument himself: drums, bass, guitar, keyboards, vocals. The music became a conversation with his father, a way to process what was coming while Eddie was still there to hear it. One song in particular took shape during those final months. Wolfgang called it Distance, and it was written directly to his father. The lyrics were simple but devastating, a son telling his father that even though they'd have to be apart, the love would remain. Wolfgang recorded it quietly, not knowing if he'd ever release it publicly. On October 6, 2020, Eddie Van Halen died at the age of 65. Wolfgang was with him at the end, along with Eddie's wife Janie and brother Alex. The news broke across the world within hours. Tributes poured in from fellow musicians, fans, and celebrities. Eddie Van Halen, the man who'd changed rock music forever, was gone. He posted a simple message on social media alongside a childhood photo. "I can't believe I'm having to write this, but my father, Edward Lodewijk Van Halen, has lost his long and arduous battle with cancer this morning. He was the best father I could ever ask for. Every moment I've shared with him on and off stage was a gift." The grief hit Wolfgang like a physical force. In an interview with Carson Daly months later, he broke down describing the pain. "Some days are better than others," he said through tears. "It doesn't seem like the pain will ever go away." He admitted feeling paralyzed by sadness. "I feel like crawling in a hole every day. But I know my dad would be really pissed off at me if I did." Wolfgang made a decision during those dark months. He would release Distance as a tribute to his father. The music video featured home videos of Wolfgang and Eddie together, playing music, laughing, living life as father and son. When the video appeared online, millions of people watched it and cried along with Wolfgang. The song climbed to #1 on Billboard's mainstream rock chart. It gave Wolfgang his first hit as a solo artist, but the success felt bittersweet. He'd gained recognition on his own terms, but the cost was losing the person who mattered most. In 2021, Wolfgang released his debut solo album under the name Mammoth WVH. The name carried significant meaning. Mammoth had been the original name of Eddie's first band, before it became Van Halen. Wolfgang was reclaiming that history while simultaneously defining his own future. Every instrument on the album was performed by Wolfgang alone. "It's 100% all me," he told NPR. "It's more pressure, but it's creatively freeing." The album received strong reviews, with critics noting that Wolfgang had finally created something distinctly his own. The sound was modern rock, influenced by bands Wolfgang grew up listening to, not a recreation of Van Halen's classic style. Distance earned Wolfgang a Grammy nomination for Best Rock Song. At the 2022 ceremony, he walked the red carpet with his mother Valerie and girlfriend Andrea Fusaro. They didn't win, but Wolfgang handled the moment with characteristic humor. "We came, we saw, but we did not conquer," he joked on Instagram. Then he added something more reflective. "I guess I'm following in his footsteps," noting that Eddie hadn't won a Grammy on his first nomination either. The touring that followed terrified Wolfgang in a new way. For years he'd hidden behind other musicians, playing bass in someone else's band. Now he was the frontman, the lead singer, the person the spotlight followed. "I was sitting in the dressing room thinking, I don't know if I can do this," he admitted. But when he stepped on stage and heard the crowd responding to his own songs, not his father's legacy, something shifted. In 2023, Wolfgang married photographer Andrea Fusaro at their Los Angeles home. The ceremony was intimate, with about 90 friends and family members present. During the wedding, a recording of Eddie's instrumental song 316, which he'd written for Wolfgang's birth, played as Wolfgang and his mother walked down the aisle together. "It was a way to include my dad," Wolfgang said softly. Valerie told reporters afterward, "They really get each other. They're so comfortable together." That same year, Wolfgang released his second album, Mammoth 2. Once again, he played every instrument himself. The confidence that had been building was now unmistakable. "Luckily, people are starting to become fans of the music first, and only then realize who my dad was," he told Guitar.com. It was the recognition he'd been seeking his entire life. In March 2024, Wolfgang found himself in an unexpected spotlight. He performed "I'm Just Ken" from the Barbie movie, alongside Ryan Gosling and Slash at the Academy Awards. Right when Ryan whips out his abs, there's a guitar-tapping solo. Wolfgang laughed in interviews afterward. "And that's me." He admitted feeling out of place among Hollywood's elite. "Not my normal place to hang around. I felt like a fish out of water." But he also recognized it as proof that people were seeing him as a musician, not as someone's son. Wolfgang's transformation isn't about rejecting his father's legacy. In interviews, he speaks about Eddie with love and reverence. He wears his father's influence proudly, while insisting on his own artistic identity. The balance he's struck seems to be working. Fans of classic Van Halen respect what he's doing. Younger listeners who discovered him through Mammoth WVH don't automatically connect him to his father's band. The shadow that followed Wolfgang for so long hasn't disappeared entirely. It probably never will, but he's learned to live with it differently. He's not fighting against his last name anymore. He's defining what that name means for his generation. Wolfgang has also become an advocate for grief awareness, speaking openly about losing his father and the ongoing process of healing. His honesty has resonated with people dealing with their own losses. He's shown that grief doesn't have a timeline and that it's okay to struggle publicly. The transformation people are talking about isn't physical or superficial. Wolfgang looks much the same as he did a few years ago. What's changed is harder to see but impossible to miss once you understand his story. He's finally comfortable in his own skin. He's making music that feels authentic to who he is, not who people expected him to be. Wolfgang Van Halen spent most of his life trying to step out of a shadow he was born into. The journey cost him years of criticism, public doubt, and eventually the loss of the father he was trying to honor. But somewhere along the way, he found something that many people born into famous families never discover: his own voice. He's proven that carrying a legendary name doesn't mean you have to be crushed by it. You can honor the past while building something new. So what do you think? Has Wolfgang Van Halen finally established himself as an artist in his own right, separate from his father's legacy? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look at Wolfgang's journey, consider subscribing for more stories about the people behind the music.